Hey everybody, this is Phil from Select Software Reviews. We're going to give everybody a couple minutes here to just sort of filter in. It looks like every second there's approximately two people joining. As we wait for everybody to join, if you want to drop into the chat where you're joining us from, it's always nice to see familiar names and also what city, what state people are coming from. Berlin. All right. Minneapolis, Iowa. Go Hawkeyes. I got to wrestle against Dan Gable once. Long story.
Hmm.
Marlborough, Massachusetts. All right. I'm in Boston. St. Louis, Cayman Islands. I'm super jealous. Mustang, Oklahoma. That's where Kendall Cross is from, Olympic champion, 1996. I'm obviously a wrestling aficionado. Um, Grand Rapids, Michigan, awesome. Texas, California, New Mexico. Wow, this is awesome, guys. All the way in India. I love somebody staying up late. Thank you. Hopefully we don't disappoint here. Indianapolis. It's awesome to see some familiar names. Hey, Jennifer. Hey, Chantel. Um, Chicago, Bay Area. Hey, Tracy. Amazing. And I'll put in, I'm from Boston, Mass. Um, awesome, everybody. Well, thanks so much for everybody for being on the call today. I think that I'm personally super excited about this discussion with these two gentlemen. Obviously, artificial intelligence has taken a lot of our headspace, I think, over the last 18 to 24 months. And there are people on the call today that have probably started using this already in their jobs, and there are people who are trying to figure out, how do I actually leverage this to make myself, my team, my company more efficient, more effective, and really start to capture all the benefits that everybody's been talking about here. And if that's you, you want to get better at utilizing artificial intelligence tools to do your job in human resources, people operations, talent acquisition, you're on the right call. And we're super excited today to have a live demonstration of specific prompts that we can use with some of these tools. We're going to talk about some of the trends. And at the end of the session, you're going to have a lot more knowledge about this fast changing and really important topic. My name is Phil Strazula. I'm the founder of Select Software Reviews, and our North Star is to help HR professionals find and buy the right HR technology. I know a lot of the folks on the call know us because you've done a call with one of our teammates, and that's kind of what we specialize in, is if you're looking for an HRIS, an applicant tracking system, payroll, you can talk to somebody in our team completely for free and get bespoke advice for your company, what vendors you should be looking at, how to deal with, maybe the CFO doesn't want to give you the budget, pricing data that we have. We make that totally accessible for anybody for free. And actually, what we're doing for anybody who joins this call is we'll basically, if you want to book a call with us, by the end of this call, we'll buy you and your team some coffee. We gave you a gift card. You can spend it whatever you want but we say we give you a cup of coffee, and I'll drop in the chat right now a link to book a time with one of our HR tech experts. If you are in the market looking for an HRIS, ATS, payroll, etc., we got a 4.9 out of 5-star rating, and we can help you out. Joining me today, two amazing, brilliant guys. Paul Carney, former CHRO, who has spent the last 30 years in HR, IT, and now the mastermind behind Perpeta, an innovative platform that helps people build, store, and organize AI prompts. He's the first certified prompt engineer that I've ever met, and he actually explained a little bit of the training and what he had to do to get that certification before this. Paul is passionate about empowering professionals to unlock the potential of AI by helping them build better prompts and really getting to brass tacks around how do we use this technology in our jobs today. Mark is somebody that I've had the privilege of knowing over the last 5+ years. He's got 30 years covering HR tech as a journalist. He started multiple companies, Right now, he's the founding editor of WorkforceAI.news. He's dedicated to analyzing and sharing his expertise on workplace tech trends, particularly AI's impact on how people work. And these are two guys that I've learned a lot from. I'm super excited to kind of just dive in here and understand more about what's going on in this AI ecosystem. How do we apply it to our day to day? And again, the thing that I'm number one most excited for is the prompt engineering stuff. We're going to get to that in a couple minutes. But Paul, I don't know if you could kind of kick us off with what are some of the case studies here? What's the value that you've seen other HR teams capture when they start utilizing artificial intelligence?
Yeah, so in fact, Mark can speak to this too in a bit because I've read an article on one of his newsletters that started talking about this, where companies are starting to say AI is slowing down a bit, and where is the ROI on it? And groups are still trying to figure out. One of the things I tell people, at least right off the bat, is what we're doing with AI and how we're using it today is going to look extremely different in about 2 to 3 years. It's like that first smartphone, that iPhone that came out. It's nowhere near what the phones are today. So, don't get caught up in why it's not going to give you something today. But the key thing is to keep trying to use it, keep trying to figure out what these things are, how they work, how you can interact with them, because I think that's going to be the most important piece for us is HR leaders in particular. And I remind people in HR, we don't just have to figure out how to use AI for ourselves. We've got the accountability and responsibility to figure out how the organization is going to use this, which means training, development, policies. And I always say, don't let IT take this over, even though it looks like a technology. This belongs to HR. So that's where I come from on it.
That's awesome. And Tracy just asked in the chat, and we encourage participation throughout the session in the chat. What is Mark's last name? And I failed to put up this slide. So I'll put it up now so everybody can see all of our names and our logos and all that stuff before we get back to the regularly scheduled programming of kind of getting into this stuff. But yeah, Mark, it sounds like you were even writing about this over the weekend. Do you have anything to share here around sort of the value that you've seen teams be able to capture by leveraging this new technology?
I think the people that do the best with AI are the people who start out knowing what they need to get from it. There are people who jump in thinking, I just want AI. And then they get kind of lost. But the people who know that they're looking for more efficiency, that they have to scan or sift through a growing number of resumes or what have you, they have a particular problem in mind that they want to deal with. I think when you use that as a starting point, you're going to be much more better served than you would be otherwise.
Yeah, there a couple of things come to mind. One is there's a use case here to put effectively a chatbot on top of your employee handbook and similar documentation. And we've seen companies that they used to use a tool like Expressive, where that's a purpose-built solution that you pay a decent amount of money to have this chatbot live on your documentation and answer a lot of the same questions you get over and over again, like around PTO, open enrollment, et cetera. And that's a great way to save around like 80% of those, maybe somewhat annoying questions that your employees are asking over and over again. Now, what's actually pretty cool is like you can use one of these extremely cheap and easy AI tools to basically learn your documentation and answer these questions. You can build your own bot effectively in like an hour. And that's really, really interesting. And so, who wouldn't like to take 80% of those questions and be able to answer them through a chat interface, which is usually pretty good. The other kind of use case that I'll talk about, which is not related to HR, but I think kind of makes this stuff real a little bit, is yesterday our water heater was broken. And I don't know anything about water heaters. I'm like the least like savvy like homeowner you've ever met in your entire life. And I literally took a picture of this thing to ChatGPT and I was like, do you know what this is? And it responded like, this is the Honeywell, blah, 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 like this model and this year. And I was like, okay, that's true. I was like, it has this symptom where like it's not working. Do you know what that might be? And it's like, check these lights. Okay, I checked the lights. I took the cover off, and it's literally walking me through this step by step. And at the end of the day, like, me who like literally doesn't know anything about this stuff, and like it scares me to touch a water heater. fix the thing that the plumber was going to charge $700 just to come out and take a look at. And so, totally not an HR thing whatsoever, but the fact that you can do that, and by the way, you can have it as a voice conversation, because on your phone with ChatGPT, you can put it in voice mode and you can just talk to this thing and it talks back to you as you're like futzing around with the cover on how to take this off.
Yep.
That is like pretty darn cool. And Stacey, to your question about what tools you use to do that, I just use the Chat GPT app that's on my phone. That I think I pay, I don't remember, maybe it's $20 or less per month. So that's pretty crazy to me. And with that, let's get into some relevant, to HR professionals use cases. And Paul, I don't know if you want to fire up a screen share and just kind of show us like some of these prompts that we can leverage today to make our lives easier.
Sure. Yeah. And I'll just say right away, I just love the fact that the first response from Rhonda, cool. I never thought about doing that. That's wonderful. I love to hear that when people say, after I'm done showing stuff, they say, I didn't know it could do that. And that's what's so neat, is you got to keep pushing it, because it can do things, it will do things that you want, that you didn't expect. And as Mark just said a minute ago, right, you got to know the why. Why do I need to use this? And don't be afraid to try things, because it might surprise you. So, all right, let me share this here. Are you guys in there?
And by the way, in the chat, please feel free to type in, just like we put in our location. Have you used AI to date? And if so, how have you used it? I've used ChatGPT. I've used the AI module in our ATS. I've used XYZ. Just super curious to hear what people have done thus far.
Cool. Great idea. Can you guys see my screen? Is it on there?
We got it.
All
If
right.
if you don't mind zooming in a bit, it will make it easier.
Yeah, let me see. How do I do that on the Zoom? Is there, or do you just want me to zoom? Is that easier?
Actually, it's pretty good.
Is that good now?
Yeah.
All right. So, and I don't know if that carries over here. Let me just go into these guys and just get them a little higher too for you, so that when I jump over to here. So, all right. So let me do this. There we go.
Wow, this is awesome. We've got a very experienced group of people on this call.
Awesome. That's
just with
great.
what they're doing. Yeah.
Well, hopefully we can still teach them some things. So, all right.
Yeah.
So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to grab this one for a LinkedIn job posting, because this is one of those things that I teach my recruiters to do, and we have had tremendous success with this. So most of you know, you got a job posting, and you might post it on LinkedIn and do some things to try to attract certain people. I work in a bank, so we were told you can't attract tellers, we call them financial services representatives, on LinkedIn. And I disagreed. I said, watch this. And we did. And there's a reason for that. So let me go in here and grab the prompt. Let me grab my job posting here. I have a job posting for a HR business partner. There's my job posting. I'm going to replace that in here and submit my answers. All right, so now when I copy this to my clipboard, and let's start with ChatGPT for a second. So I'm going to go back up here. You can see that basically my prompt is create 2 LinkedIn posts that our team can use to attract people to the job posting. For one, please target an audience of people who may have led previously and are now returning to the workforce. For the second posting, I want an audience of current HR professionals who are ready for that larger challenge. I say make it fun and dynamic, include relevant emojis and hashtags, and then you can see I've got that job posting. So that's basically what it was that I just posted in here. So now what this is going to do is it's going to come up and it's going to say, all right, here's the first one. Targeting candidates returning to the workforce, ready for a new chapter, step back in leadership with us. Hey, experienced leaders, have you led before? And then down here, if you've been a leader and now looking for new challenge, and it talks about different things. If you're ready to bring your experience and leadership back into action, let's connect. So you can see it kind of referred to the people that were coming back. This one here is now targeting current HR seeking a bigger challenge, calling HR pros ready for the bigger stage, and it talks about it. So this is the same job posting, but this is actually looking and targeting different people. Are you looking to ready to level up your HR game and make a difference? We want you on our team. So one of the things that's most effective, first of all, from a marketing perspective, this helps you then target who may be reading these types of things, or it'll be interesting to them. The hook hopefully gets them. But with LinkedIn, if you're familiar with how the algorithms work, LinkedIn algorithms will look at the content, and if it's something that's relevant to what that person typically looks at, views, interacts with, it will likely put it in their feed. That's the other trick here. By doing this, by separating and taking one job posting and creating numerous types of targeted audiences, the
Mm.
words, the phrases, and the things you're saying here are going to cause LinkedIn to put it in their feed, which is one of the advantages you get, the power you get by doing something like this. And I will say, if you just try this yourself, it is very powerful. We have changed the way we recruit on LinkedIn. This has helped us do that. We've also developed some scripts that will help us sort of build relationships with people for the future jobs we know we're going to need to fill, but we're not quite there yet, but we're building relationships with them. We've got relationship building ones on LinkedIn that will post content that will get onto their feed because it's stuff they would typically be looking at. So does that make sense? Any thoughts and ideas?
I've got a couple of questions. One is just because we have a certified prompt engineer here, if you don't mind, like at the prompt level, maybe calling out a couple of the best practices that you've
Sure.
incorporated here, and some of the maybe like worst practices that you've seen people do when they first get started with stuff like this.
Yeah, so one of the things, and I can best show that here, and I'll look at the, what I'll call the, oops, let me go back to my workbench. Let me call uh, interview coach one, because I think this one has a better view for you. So one of the things I really teach people to do is, you're probably used to just typing verbose, I call them verbose or narrative prompts into AI, and that's okay. Except the problem is AI is scanning that post, trying to, your prompt, trying to figure out what you want. What do you want? What am I supposed to be? So I teach people this concept here, which is structure. Is the better you can structure it, and I like this structure of role, request, goal, instructions, output formats, whatever it's going to be, in this case, context. So when you learn to do that better, you get such better results, because in this case here, there's no ambiguity. The AI knows this is what I want you to be, this is the request I'm making of you, and this is the goal. So to me, that's one of the first best practices, is to develop more structure to your prompts. The second thing is to have templates, is to create templates that you can reuse later on. And you can just put them in Word docs or Google Docs. I did that. I've got thousands of them, which is why I ended up building this system, because I got tired of chasing them down. But you can build a template, because you notice this one here at the bottom, I have these little brackets to insert a job description. So this can be used for any job that I want. And I just insert the job description on the fly. So that's one of the things I teach people too, is that concept of templates and reusable little pieces of code are the better ways for you to start really figuring out how to interact, especially if you've got a team. You can share those little snippets and have consistency across your organization.
I don't know if this will work, but if you can go back to ChatGPT, it might be interesting to say, could you create a photo for Instagram as well as an Instagram post to promote this job post? Because
Sure.
I think some people aren't aware that these tools now can create photos and even videos for us at this point.
So, and you'll notice this. So I always talk about the emotional intelligence of talking with AI, and you don't need to say, but I always like to say great, even though it doesn't care. It's really not going to interact, but I always do give it kudos and tell it when I like something, and that stuff. So it's just the way I type, but you don't need to do that because it doesn't really care. Um,
I do too, for some reason. Maybe I'm just worried about the 50 years from now, if they have a catalog on was Phil nice to us and they have leverage or something, but
All right, so I basically just said, great, now create an Instagram post and a graphic for that second post you created. I don't play much with ChatGPT's images, although you can see it's generating one. There's an ideogram is the place I go to, and I prefer it much more. It's so powerful. But there you go. It created it. Now you'll notice one of the things it does is sometimes you take on a future, join OS, human, but
yeah.
that's the product, is when you ask it to do a lot of things with words, it's generally going to have messy words to it. But you can kind of play with that and have it do it a little bit more. But yeah, there you go. So it just created an image, and you can say, here's the Instagram post.
Mm-hmm. And
You could even tell it to create an image without words. That way you don't face this challenge of you've got words that are messed up. What I do in these cases here too is if it does stuff like this is I'll pull this into Canva or somewhere else and just use the magic edit and say replace that, which is actually a pretty cool tool too. You can just replace the words with your own words.
love it. I know there's another use case that we chatted about in before the session that I think would be awesome to dive into, which is this interview coach. I'm excited. And as you pull that up, somebody in the chat asked, what are the tools that I should be thinking about for these sorts of use cases? And I think it's probably ChatGPT, Perplexity, and Claude. Is that pretty accurate?
Those are the main ones. Microsoft Copilot is, of course, being built into everything and everything out there. Gemini is the Google one. There's a couple more. Meta's got their Llama. There's Mistral, which is a French company. There are quite a few out there. And I'll say I use a lot of them, and they'll give different results at different times depending on what you're doing. And I'll just say they keep changing rapidly. They keep introducing new features and capabilities. Claude has the one that takes over the computer. Apparently OpenAI is going to launch that in January. So, it's they're all constantly changing these engines to do things. So it's really find one that works well for you and keeps track of things for you. That's the biggest thing to do is really finding the ones that work best for you. But yeah, and then you've got a whole slew of other companies that are creating very specific engines to do things. What's going to end up happening, it's kind of like the web back in the 1990s. There were all these companies that popped up to do all these things, and then it narrowed down. That's why I say it's not going to look like today what it is there. All these companies that are creating videos and avatars and all this other stuff, that's just going to be built into the standard engines eventually. So you won't need all these separate products because it's all going to be in the main ones.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I've found, having now used these tools for a little bit of time, it's almost like frustrating when there isn't that functionality built in. So somebody in the chat, I think it was Rochelle, is asking, has anybody had like a good tool to build PowerPoint presentations? And I use Canva all the time, and I always get so annoyed that I can't just like talk to Canva now and it just like builds the slides, right? But 6 months from now, you certainly will be able to. And
Yeah.
I think that's one of the interesting things about getting a facility with these sorts of tools is like, when that next generation happens, you're not like being like, wait, what is this? You already have an understanding of what these tools can do.
And that's my biggest thing I tell people is, and again, you'll hear me say this, it always comes down to the prompt, because no matter what those tools look like in the future, how you interact with them and understand how to deal with these systems is the key. So practicing now is great, because eventually when you have, like you said, Phil, when those tools come along and mature enough, you're going to be way ahead of the game and get stuff out of them. On the PowerPoint, an interesting thing, I had somebody do this in a live seminar I do, where I talked about how you could generate the outline and possible slides for a presentation about a topic. He's like, well, how could I get this to work in PowerPoint? I said, yeah, it doesn't quite do it, but here's a trick you could do. He did it live and it worked. I said, have the ChatGPT in this case generate the Visual Basic script for creating those slides in PowerPoint. He did it. It created the VBS code. He copied and pasted it into the VBS window, hit run, and it created the slides in PowerPoint. So a little more work, a little more technical, but it worked.
Yeah, that's a really funny workaround.
Yep.
Thanks for sharing that. Okay, yeah, interview coach, super curious to see what this looks like.
So one of the features, and I have accountability coaches I teach people to do, interview coach is one. This is really cool because what this allows you to do is you can ask the AI to take on a role that interacts with you. And so I'll take a look quickly at this prompt before we do anything. It says, role, you're an interview coach helping us prepare for interviews by simulating responses, generating follow-up questions. Help me prepare for the interviews is the request. The goal is to help my interview skills. But look at this, the instructions. Review the job description. Ask me what my first question is. When I ask the question, you simulate the interviewee's response based on the job requirements. After you provide the response, provide 3 possible follow-up questions to allow me to explore. We'll continue the simulation as you provide answers. We will conclude the simulation when I say thank you for your time. After simulation concludes, you'll provide me with suggestions for improving my interview techniques. So you don't need fancy tools, AI agents, all these things. you can develop them yourselves. You can just, this is a simple script right here that you can do that. So let me do this. Let me copy that same HRB job description, come in here and throw it into my prompt, copy to the clipboard, and let's use Perplexity this time.
And Perplexity is mostly used to search the open web, is my understanding, but you're using it for this use case as well.
It generally is. Yep. And we'll just use it here just to give you, we can go over to ChatGPT too and see how it does it. But here it is. And it says, I'm ready to simulate the interview, blah, blah, blah. Please ask your first question. So I'll say, tell me why you are a good fit for this job. And of course, with this, if I was doing this in the 4.0 or IO in ChatGPT, it would show me what it's thinking. And it says right here, I believe I'm an excellent fit for this role because my expertise in strategic, so you can see it's giving you the whole background. And then it gives me what I asked it for. It gives me possible things to follow up with. So I can say, follow up with question 2.
What's interesting is a friend of mine is a product manager, and he will actually basically allow Claude to listen to meetings,
right?
For this sort of prompting of like, what's next, right? Like, what should I dig into? What doesn't make sense here? What might be missing? Which you could imagine a live interview coach effectively. Correct. As well. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And you can see, so we asked it basically and I don't have to see, the cool part is I didn't have to say, how do you approach handling? I didn't have to ask that question. I just said to the interview coach, follow up with question 2, and it knew which one it was, about handling complex employee relations issues. And here it is. When handling complex, I follow structured approach. Next, I analyze, of course, then it gives you some additional questions you can follow up with. In employee relations, I might ask things like, tell me when it didn't go well. But here's one that's pretty cool. And again, so this will continue on until I say thank you for your time. But here's an interesting one. So say, okay, give me a response that is not a good one. I'll just say not a good one. Because, it's giving you some really good responses right now. So when I handle complex employee relations, I usually try to get it over as quickly as possible. These things can be such a headache. Now, of course, it went a little too far because this is, hopefully you don't get this in an interview, but but you can see where it suggests what steps you take to address it. It's got you back on track to get it back again. So this is what's neat is you can ask it. Now, again, I probably should have said ask one that's a little off track, not so far off track. I usually don't bother with documentation. Hopefully you're not hearing that from an HRB. So this is what's cool is you can do this. And I'll say right here, thank you for your time.
And by the way, we might have time for one more sort of use case. If there's anything anybody wants to see, feel free to drop it in the chat and we'll try to pick out one that we can cover succinctly, I guess.
And see, so when I said thank you for your time, it knew to conclude and tell me some suggestions. Look, it gave me the feedback that my initial one was a great open-ended question, which is good. Follow-up, you asked a follow-up, which is excellent. It shows you're listening. However, don't be afraid to ask your follow-up questions based on their responses rather than choosing, that was, yeah. So behavioral-based questions. So again, challenging responses. It's giving you a lot of great information that's telling you what to do.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And I think we're starting to see as well these tools being built into I mentioned Canva, and a few people in the chat were kind enough to say that there's a GPT plugin, or there is an AI functionality of Canva that I agree is also not very good, but we're seeing this in applicant tracking systems, candidate assessment programs, HRISs, where the functionality is sort of built in.
Yep. Here's another example of what I call the accountability coach. So again, assume the role of an accountability coach to help me track my goals. You'll interact with me on a regular basis. You can see step 1, when I say good morning, respond with an inspirational quote from a famous person. Ask me what tasks I've accomplished. When I provide the answers, ask me follow up. Continue until I say thank you. When I say thank you, you provide me a summary of where I am with my goals and then say goodbye. What's really cool about this is you start a conversation in a ChatGPT, say, Then you do this the first time. Then the next morning in that conversation, you come back in and type good morning. Guess what it's going to do? It's going to give you a quote. It's going to ask you where you are. And so you can continue this on a regular basis. And I jokingly say to people, then at the end of the month, you can ask it in that conversation, say, great, give me a summary of what I've done this month. You print it and give it to your boss. So you've been able to say, here's what I have done by having this little accountability coach help you stay on track and suggest where you need to focus. You can make the instructions a lot more in depth to say, give me real advice on what I need to do to stay on track or move ahead of what I'm trying to get done.
Yeah, I absolutely love this. And Mark, I'm curious on your perspective as somebody who's, covered this industry for a while and is talking to vendors, seeing the trends, like what are some of the areas of interest that you're noticing within this AI ecosystem and how these tools are either coming into sort of the core tools that we know and love themselves, or just like the world of work for HR professionals?
Right. Well, I think you're right, Paul, that right now you're seeing a lot of fragmentation and a lot of individual sort of tasks are available as individual applications, but they're going to start to come together. And they probably won't be marketed under ChatGPT or Google Gemini or something like that. I think they're going to be wrapped into programs that are more focused on the core, say, HR application than the AI application. People are still really focused on efficiency and volume with AI. Those are the things where the technology is really, really standing out. And I know of people who've tried to come up with other things for it to do and haven't really been that successful. I think we have to remember that this is still fairly early in its evolution. And though it's doing some really amazing stuff, it's kind of limited in exactly what it can do. And I think the example Paul just showed actually are some of the better examples I've ever seen of what you can make it do if you sit down and really think through your prompts before you begin.
Yeah, agreed. And it's interesting also to think about the limitations. That I think the graphic that was shared is a nice summary, right? It's like, hey, it created this graphic about an HRBP job and blah, blah, but some of the words were messed up, and that's like basically like a summation of sort of where this tech is. It's like, hey, like it would have taken me 3 hours to create this graphic. I probably would have never done it. But it needs that supervision level without a doubt. I don't know if there are any interesting tools that you all have seen that are purpose built for HR. There's one that crossed my desk that I actually haven't done a demo of yet called MetaView, which is basically an AI assistant for recruiters that is almost doing like live coaching and note taking and things like that. I also got a pretty interesting demo from a people analytics tool called Organostic, which recently got acquired. Mark, you probably remember by who. My memory's faulty, but where basically, instead of in order to query all this people analytics data that 5 years ago you probably had to be like a PhD, and 3 years ago you at least needed to know SQL. Now you can just write something, right? It's like what's our best source of hire, or what's the average tenure of employees, stuff like that. So some interesting stuff that's being built into these solutions that I think will continue to evolve and make some headways. I don't know if you guys have seen anything interesting, or anybody on the chat for that matter have seen something pop up in your ATS, your HRIS, your whatever that you've gotten use out of.
I think the big one that's been out there, and it came from Josh Bersin, and again, talk about somebody that's the HR space guy, the Galileo thing he created with his team, where he took that immense amount of HR knowledge they have and created it. Now, the disadvantage to Galileo is it is enterprise level and it's expensive, and I've seen demos of it and it is powerful, but it's just not available to the average HR person, unfortunately.
But
Yeah.
I think that's a symptom of where we are in the development phase of AI. If you remember the first computers that came out, it was 40 years ago now. they were pretty expensive. You couldn't go out and get a desktop computer for a few $100s. It probably was going to cost you a few $1,000s. But as the technology became more common, the price came down. And one of the things that I think the AI industry is worried about right now is the exact same thing is going to happen. People aren't going to be really they're not going to be willing to pay really top dollar for the capabilities of an LLM or even a small model.
Yeah. And even the
Yeah.
cost of them setting up their own, as you see LLM as a service come along, which is coming along, we're getting there. But boy, okay, so you've got all this unstructured data in your systems, even if you could get your hands around it, which is another problem. But then you got to get prompt engineers to help you really focus on how to build the programming, the algorithms to get the machine, the LLM to understand it so you can build a bot on top of it. And those prompt engineers are very expensive today. I mean, we're talking $300,000-$400,000 a year for these people that are that smart with data science, computer science, mathematics, and that's just so it keeps it out of reach right at the moment.
But you could argue, I think, that a lot of this comes down to sort of fundamental knowledge of your business.
Sure.
That in order to write a good prompt, you need to know exactly what it is that you want to do, and you need to be able to articulate that, to the system, to the AI. Um, and that's a big part of the battle, I think.
Yeah. I think
Sorry,
one
Phil. I was
thing,
just to say there was a woman that mentioned something in there, and it is a good point to bring up. She said, "Please, please, please use employee and not someone's actual name. Data privacy and security on these things. Do not put personal data. Do not put even corporate
yeah,
information. Be extremely, extremely careful doing that because while you've got the feature turned off that says don't train on my data, you still have no idea where that stuff goes."
100%, and how it'll be used in the future.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's certainly the Wild West in terms, especially in terms of content. And all of these companies, these LLMs have basically, borrowed the internet's content
Right.
to train their models. And so there's already sort of a shaky moral ground there when it comes to IP.
Yeah.
Somebody asked around tools, and there's a side conversation going on in the chat, which I love, about tools. MetaView is the one that I had mentioned. Somebody posted there. Somebody asked about Ashby, which I think is a great applicant tracking system. I think somebody else is asking what's the most useful ChatGPT, which ChatGPT is a app that's owned by OpenAI. That's one of these LLMs. The others, the main ones being Perplexity, which Paul just shared. Claude is another one, and then it's sort of, there's a long tail. There's Llama, etc. Gemini. I think from a tool selection standpoint, what's sort of interesting is that you are seeing applicant tracking systems, HRSs, start to build in some of this technology. And what we're encouraging people to do when they demo tools is really understand what is the AI philosophy of the vendor that you're going to partner with, because as we've talked about, this stuff is changing very, very rapidly. But there's no doubt that it is unbelievably impactful. I used to work for a venture capital firm and actually went on Monday to have lunch with my old colleagues. And, probably the smartest people I know out there, one of the biggest venture capital firms in the world. And they're basically like, this is the new paradigm. This is the new mobile, big data, cloud computing. It's going to change everything. And I think from my perspective, this is the same to me as Excel. Like it's sort of just like a part of my life and my tool set. And so I will say that every single day there are companies coming to us, HR professionals, trying to figure out like what AI tool should I be using, or when I'm looking at an HRIS, how do I think about this? And if you're curious about that, you're trying to figure this out for your company, you can book a time with one of our advisors anytime you want for free, and get some advice for your company, your strategy, and the tools that are right for you. And I'll put again in the chat right now a link to book this with our colleague Zach, who's amazing. And you can read all about him on our, I feel like half our reviews are just about Zach and what an awesome guy is. But if you need that resource, please feel free to book that call. We've gotten so many questions, and I want to make sure that we have time for those questions. But before we jump into those, and by the way, if you have other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Mark, I really wanted to get your tips on just sort of like driving adoption of these tools. How do we think about measuring success? What are some of the best practices here?
I think one of the first things to think about is transparency. That if you're going to be implementing any kind of AI solution, make sure you're honest with your employees about what you're going to be using it for, how you're going to be using it, and what it's going to do with the information. One of the biggest roadblocks that companies find is basically fear. Um, People know that this is going to impact their jobs. There's still a number of people out there who are worried that AI is going to replace their jobs. The more honest you are with folks, the more you're going to get buy-in, the more they're going to use the system, learn from the system, and bring you information about the system that will be handy. Another self is when we touched on this before, but when you're starting to use an AI, make sure you're grounded in the topic that you want to cover with it. You want to have details of what you're after. You want to be able to lead the AI in the direction of how this might impact your business. You want to give the AI as much information as you can in order for it to come back with a really useful and pertinent answer. And finally, I'm a writer, a journalist, so I always think about these things. If you're using an AI to help you draft something, whether it's a job description or a white paper or what have you, it doesn't absolve you of the responsibility of making sure it's correct. AI has been known to come up with a lot of very weird things and just flat out fiction. A couple of years ago, there were a couple of attorneys in New York who found themselves sanctioned by a court because they cited cases that ChatGPT had given them in response to a question. And ChatGPT had basically made the cases up. They didn't exist. So you have to be careful that you don't find yourself in the same position. In other words, your knowledge as an HR professional is still very important to the equation. So you have to work with the AI really more as a partner than as a tool, and something that needs to be supervised and worked with to make sure that it's giving you useful information.
Yeah, and if I can follow up quick on that, that's why I saw somebody wrote this and I love this now. Instead of calling it artificial intelligence, it should be called augmented intelligence because, again, by itself, it can't augment itself, but that's where the human is. And when it augments you, that's what it is. To Mark's point too, I have a catchphrase. I say, use AI to be a better you, not another you. That authenticity he talked about, don't just copy and paste it and say it's you. First of all, people are going to figure it out because AI has as someone mentioned, a specific cadence to it that you're going to see it very fast. But the other part too is, and it comes down to what Mark just said, is understanding what you're doing. Learning how to prompt is really the key. It's how that language. It's not like talking to a person. We use natural language. It's really making sure you know how you're talking to these things. Because it is different, and it is learning how to do that effectively gets you better results. It really comes down to that. Whether you're stating it out, verbally or typing it, because now these audio systems are there. That prompt really is the big difference, and just different words. I have a prompt I show people. You change one word and you get totally different results because remember, these things are about words. Remember, you probably have heard the whole strawberry thing. It didn't know how many letter R's there were in the strawberry, in the word strawberry. The ChatGPT changed it. I think they took the entire dictionary and captured that now because they didn't like that out there. But it didn't know the word strawberry. It just knows it as a color, as a fruit. It doesn't know the word because it's a pattern matching system. And to follow up quick on that CNN case, yeah, the CNN talked about that lawyer case. The problem was that lawyer didn't prompt correctly. He said, "I've got this argument I'm making. Give me a case to support it." And it's a generative AI. It did. It said, "Here's a great case that would support it." He failed to say, "Give me the source of the citation, show me the case." He didn't say,
Yeah.
"Don't make it up," which is a prompt, right? He didn't add that to his prompt and he got caught. So that's, again, you got to have better prompts.
I think it's safe to say that if you give them a shallow prompt, you're going to get a shallow answer.
Correct. Yep.
It's either going to be very light or it's just going to be very light on facts. So the more detailed your prompt, and I think the format of prompts that you were showing, you, Paul, was a great way to sort of get your arms around this. The more detailed the prompt, the better you're going to come out at the end.
Yep. And someone said, so someone just mentioned the word hallucinated about those cases. Hallucinations are a different thing. It made it up. It generated stuff and made it up. That's different from hallucinations. Hallucinations are when you get a weird answer that's not really anything near what you asked about, but the mathematical people behind the scenes see that all the patterns really match. The vectors of numbers is how they do all this. That's the part I learned in my prompt engineering. So that's a hallucination. Those are a little bit different from making up. But remember, generative AI, they're called generative AI because they take all this unstructured stuff and they make something from it. So you got to drive it, and you can direct them. That's that little snippet. You can tell it on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being don't make anything up to 10 being as creative as you want. You can tell it. Level 3, for HR stuff, if you're doing an employee relations type thing and you're saying, I got a situation, you probably want a 0 level. But if you're telling a story to your child at night, make it level 10.
I love the augmented intelligence.
Yeah, that was cute. I like that when that guy said that one time, and I'm like, that just it helps you understand it. Yeah.
It
Yeah,
does.
and it makes it a lot less scary too. I don't think anybody, certainly not on this call, because like you're learning about it, and a lot of folks on this call, I've been sort of blown away by the level of expertise that people have shown in the chat. But yeah, we're very far away from that. I'll now start the networking portion of the call, where I'll put in my LinkedIn into the chat, and anybody feel free to connect with me, and anybody feel free to do the same. If you want to connect with like-minded people who are interested in HR technology and learning about AI, others in the HR community in general, feel free to drop your LinkedIn in the chat, and folks will connect. I know there are probably a few, somebody mentioned they have a job interview tomorrow. Feel free to network away. All right, we're getting them in there.
Look at them
Hello.
all. And yeah, for those folks that follow me on LinkedIn, I have a prompt today. I put a prompt out there every single day so that people can, learn prompts in a variety of topics. So if you can't find a topic that doesn't interest you, as Mark said, that why should I use it? Let me know. I'll create one. But every day there's a prompt out there. So
That's awesome. Yeah, and this stuff, it's changing every day, which makes it a little bit intimidating, but I do feel as though this is just the new, internet, Microsoft Excel, like, whatever you want to think about it, just like the new tool that you kind of need to understand. Otherwise, you're going to be the person who doesn't know how to use a smartphone in 2024, and you're going to be less marketable. Let's put it that way. We have a lot of Q&A. We'll try to get to as much as we can. And one of the questions that's come up a few times in the chat is this going to be recorded? For sure, we're going to send it out to you. So don't stress. You missed the first 10, 15 minutes. You want to rewatch it, whatever. Please, don't stress about that. First question, as HR teams integrate AI more deeply into their workflows, what steps can orgs take to ensure that AI-driven processes remain both transparent and ethical, especially in sensitive areas like recruiting and employee engagement? How are you seeing leading organizations balance the efficiency gains with AI with the need to maintain trust and fairness in HR practices? Paul or Mark, feel free to chime in on this.
You can start, Paul, if you want.
sure. Yep. So I'm just making sure I'm off on mute because I was putting myself on mute once in a while. So I think the biggest way, Mark kind of said this earlier too, is education, is making sure people understand what your goals are. Organizations have visions and missions and values and stuff. You've got to figure out how this fits into it. And I think it's really focusing on that. In fact, the other day, as you read this concept of AI agents, these agents things are really going to be the next big flow. And someone started talking about having the agents on your team as a team member. And how are you going to interact with that agent, or how's the agent going to interact with your team members? I'm a techie guy and I understand stuff that scares me even. So I can imagine the person who's not at the level I am is going to be like, whoa, wait, I've got to now interact with an AI, and who is this AI, and what are they getting paid, and right, that type of stuff. So I think that educational part is really the most important piece to get started, to get everyone integrated. And it's tough. Someone mentioned it in there before. How do I keep up with the trends? How do I do that? And I will say this in my speeches: follow someone you trust, follow people that can continue to help you understand where this stuff is going. People, like Mark, who write really well about this and gather a lot of resources. Phil, your teams that keep on top of the trends and help identify the tools available and what they can do for you. It really is. I think we're still in that educational phase right now, and that's the biggest part we can all do in HR.
And I would just add that transparency is sort of an overused word in discussing AI, but it's a critical word. The more honest you are with your workforce about not just what you want them to do with AI, but what your goals are for the business with AI, the more receptive they're going to be, and I think the better your end result is going to be.
Love it. Adam just asked this question, which was actually one of the ones that we had through the RSVP link when people signed up, which is effectively, how do you, if somebody is a candidate, you're interviewing a candidate, you think that they're using AI to answer the questions, what do you do? Mark, what are your thoughts here?
That's really an interesting one, because do you want to sort of call their bluff and refocus the discussion on their use of AI and whether or not it was proper, or do you want to get a sense of whether or not they are going to be a good team member and understand your business well enough to join it? My feeling is, in a situation like that, would be to ask whether or not they have used AI, and see what kind of answer you get. Let them know that if they say that they did use AI, that's not a deal breaker. That you want to understand their thought processes, and you want to try to get a sense of whether or not it brought them value. What they did in this case, using AI to prep for the interview, uh, isn't far removed from what they might end up using AI for your business and in their job. So you want to know how sophisticated they are, not just in using the application, but also in applying the application, back to the whole notion of augmented technology, mixing their knowledge with the AI's knowledge to come up with a deeper, better answer.
That's where I stand too. I actually had a conversation with a friend of mine the other day, and in my opinion, again, it's just another tool, right? It's like they're going to use email, they're going to use Microsoft Word, they're going to use Google, etc. It's almost, in my opinion, we're hiring for a couple of roles, and like I put in it like I want somebody who's using AI. And so if you can use it responsibly in your cover letter, everything else, any project that we have, etc. That's a good thing, I think. If somebody, obviously copies and pastes and doesn't think about it, and there's citations to some, case law that doesn't exist, that's not the best thing in the world.
It's trickier when you're talking about some kind of written product. If I were giving a news test to somebody who I was going to hire for a newsroom, and it was a take-home thing, and they sent me a finished story, but they'd had AI write it. I would want to know that, and I'd be on the lookout for that, because there are still baseline things about a job that you need people to know, and you don't want them faking it.
It's true. Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. Another question that we got is around the most effective AI tools you've seen implemented for talent acquisition, how they compare with traditional recruitment methods in terms of candidate quality and time to hire. I think there's a couple of flavors of this. Maybe there's many flavors. One is in applicant tracking systems and seeing more automation. Basically, this happens and then this happens. So maybe like candidate gets to a certain stage, and then we want to write them an email, and maybe we can customize that email with GPT, right? I think one of the most interesting things that I've seen over the last few years is in the sourcing, talent acquisition, kind of filling that top of funnel. So there are tools now where it can read a job rec, it can understand ideal candidate profile, it can find those people on the internet, whether that's LinkedIn or GitHub or Twitter or whatever, and it can message those people, and it can deal with a little bit of back and forth and schedule the meeting for you. And that to me is pretty darn powerful. Is it 100% perfect? No. But that could drastically augment your top of funnel. I don't know, Paul, Mark, if either of you guys have seen anything else kind of interesting in the TA space.
No, I think what you're describing gives TA a lot more flexibility in how they approach their recruiting campaigns, because they don't have to worry about the volume that's coming back at them. It's going to be a whole lot easier with an AI tool in the ATS to sift through, 600 or 1,000 responses, which might have been close to impossible in the past.
Yep.
Yeah, most of my experiences with those are what UKG, Dayforce, Workday, what they're integrating into their systems with that AI capability. Pretty familiar with each of those, which Phil, I'm sure your teams are too, watching what they're doing. Because I get, David, the CEO of Dayforce, and I talk geek a lot, and it's fun to watch. So I get actually inside track to some of these things to see what they're doing, because they know with my HR and AI experience, they kind of want to show me, hey, look what we're doing now. And it's a lot of fun. But that's going to be, I think, the next big one, is to watch what they continue to do with the power of their data systems they've got.
100%. I think these technologies are going to favor the incumbents a lot. They've got the data, they've got all this complicated stuff that's hard to rip and replace, and they can make it a lot more efficient. Thoughts on note takers in the office or in the workplace generally, I guess. We've all seen these autopilots, et cetera, join the Zoom calls, the Google Meets. Any thoughts on, compliance issues, etiquette? What should we be thinking about there?
I think anything that's recording other people needs to be disclosed, and the tools that I've seen do a pretty good job of that. If you log into Zoom and somebody's using something, you'll usually be told right away that it's being recorded or notes are being taken or something like that. Other than that, I think it comes back to making sure that the notes make sense and are accurate. It's not beyond the realm of possibility that a note taker would misinterpret something, and if you go back and look at those notes a week later, you may not catch something that differs from what the reality was. So I think you just need to be very careful in how you use those.
Yeah, I'm going to put on my employee relations hat. And as a CHRO that has sat through depositions and lawsuits, both sides of the table being deposed and watching all of our people be deposed, which is the most hideous thing to sit through. But watching lawyers pick apart an email from 3 years ago and focus on one word that is out of context, this scares me, because all of this stuff that's being recorded, oh my gosh, it's going to be a lawyer's heyday. They'll be able to grab every little word and stuff, because you think about it, when we take notes or notes are taken or a quick email summary is sent, it's nothing what the data drove is going to be with these. So it scares me to have all that information out there, not because we're trying to hide anything. It's just because stuff can be taken out of context. And to Mark's point, if it's not accurate, if you didn't go back and review it to make sure it's exactly what it should have been, oh boy. And like I said, during a request for documentation, when the lawyers send you the thing and say, don't delete anything and send us everything, wow, that's just going to be a nightmare in my zoo. But that's that side of the table going, woo, just be careful that you know what you got there.
Yeah.
Yeah, what you really don't want in that situation is to have to turn over a bunch of documents that you've never read before.
Correct. Right. So if you've got all these meeting notes that were taken by an AI, you never reviewed them, but yet they're recorded on your system and they grab all those. Wow. Woo.
Yeah. Very scary stuff. We're basically at the top of the hour. I want to thank you two gentlemen for an amazing session. I want to thank everybody who joined us. Everybody's busy. HR teams are unbelievably busy, overworked. under-resourced. You probably got, 10 different employee relations things in your inbox right now. We are going to follow up with a recording and resources. If you want help on buying the right HR software, we're always here. And we'll put another link in to the email to you can get that gift card if you're interested, as sort of saying thanks for being on the webinar. And we can help you out, get the right information to figure out what HR tech to buy. And I'll put another sort of plug in the chat here as well. But yeah, again, thank you guys so much. I learned a lot, and it's amazing to see the nitty gritty. How do we actually implement this stuff? Thank you to the audience, everybody who chimed in. It was a pleasure, awesome energy, great to see people from all over the world, from all different perspectives, who have used these tools, who have amazing questions and perspectives. I always like when we learn from the audience too. And I hope everybody has an awesome rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Mark. Great to work with you guys.
Thank you all.